representative of Iraq for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. سيد الرئيس لقد كلفني السيد وزير.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I was assigned by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic. He entrusted me with making this statement on his behalf, as he was unable to attend this meeting due to the difficulty of travel resulting from the unilateral coercive measures imposed on Syria. Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to thank His Excellency Mr. Sergei Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, and his delegation for convening this important meeting on the situation in the Middle East. The Russian Federation has always stood in solidarity with people suffering from colonization and injustice. The delegation of the Arab Republic of Syria aligns itself with Azerbaijan's statement on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Mr. President, a few days ago, the holy month of Ramadan came to an end. This holy month witnesses every year a new criminal escalation on the part of Israel, as well as aggressive practices against the Palestinian people that put all humanity to shame. Unfortunately, the Security Council stands as witness to those crimes against humanity without lifting a finger. Or maybe it is not allowed to do so, given the umbrella of immunity and unlimited support for Israel provided by some of the permanent members of the Security Council, and which are known to all. The Syrian Arab Republic condemns with the strongest terms the attacks of the Israeli occupation forces against worshippers in Al-Aqsa Mosque and the desecration by Israel of the holy sanctuary. And we do deplore the continued international silence regarding the crimes of the Israeli occupation that aim to ignite the region and shove it into higher levels of tension and instability. Syria holds the Israeli occupation authorities and their supporters fully responsible for this escalation and the repercussions thereof. And we call upon the United Nations to condemn those violations and to stop them and to ensure that they are not to be repeated. Also, we call that Israel has to be compelled to implement the resolutions of international legitimacy related to the Palestinian people and to enable the Palestinian people to enjoy their legitimate and inalienable national rights. It has become clear that the recurrent political crises inside Israel compel its failed leaders to export their internal crisis by launching attacks against the defenseless Palestinian people and by committing acts of aggression against Syria and its people, as well as the people of southern Lebanon, in which underscores the approach of the law of force and the jungle. And this has been the signature of Israel's behavior since 1948 until this very moment. Mr. President, it's unfortunate that the question of Palestine and its people, who are suffering daily for decades the most heinous crimes, has become a routine matter without any tangible effort to compel the occupying power to stop its multifaceted aggression and to hold it accountable for its actions. It's more unfortunate and deplorable that some treat the killer and the victim equally. They treat the occupying power and the defenseless people subject to this occupation equally. These defenseless people who are deprived of their most basic rights, such as the right to life, then both sides are required to exercise maximum restraint. Israel, the occupying power, was and still is the only reason behind the emergence and continuation of the plight and tragedy of the Palestinian people, as it has expelled Palestinians from their homes under the weight of killing, massacres, intimidation, forced displacement, confiscation of property, and home demolitions, and turned them into refugees for decades. The responsibility for the Palestinian refugee question is an international political, legal, and moral responsibility before being a mere humanitarian or service responsibility. The Syrian Arab Republic stresses that the continuation of the work of UNRWA and its support to Palestinian refugees is indispensable, especially in light of the continued Israeli occupation of the occupied Palestinian territories. And we do stress the importance of UNRWA's continuing to fulfill its mandate and secure the necessary funding for its budget from the United Nations, as well as the contributions of donor countries adequately and sustainably. Mr. President, the crimes perpetrated by the Israeli occupation in Palestinian territories are inseparable from the practices of this entity in the occupied Syrian Arab Golan since 1967, which is evident in the continuation by Israel, the occupying power in the Syrian Golan, for more than 5 decades, its aggressive policies against Syrian people, and its practice of the most heinous violations of international law and international humanitarian law, including arrest, killing, and displacement of Syrians. Also, this is reflected in Israel's systematic expansionist settlement policy in the occupied Golan with the aim of perpetuating the occupation and increasing the number of settlers, thus imposing demographic change, as well as stealing the natural resources, confiscating lands, and establishing projects on those lands that cause catastrophic effects on the lives of Syrians in the Golan. In addition to the foregoing, the Israeli occupation forces use the occupied Syrian Golan as a platform to launch repeated attacks on the sovereignty of the Syrian lands by bombing and carrying out assassinations of innocent civilians and targeting Syrian infrastructure. The Israeli occupation forces launched consecutive attacks last March and this April, targeting areas in and around Damascus, as well as Homs and its countryside, that caused the death of innocent civilians, the injury of others, as well as material damage. On the 22nd of last March, Israel once again targeted Aleppo International Civil Airport, which led it being out of service and thus halted the United Nations air transport services and the delivery of humanitarian aid to those affected by the earthquake that hit Syria on February 6th, as this airport was a gateway for the delivery of humanitarian aid. The fact that Israel launched this terrorist aggression in conjunction with the visits of UN officials to Syria to follow up efforts made to alleviate the difficult humanitarian conditions the country is going through after years of war and the devastating earthquake is not strange for a terrorist entity whose suspicious origin coincided with the assassinations of UN officials and peace mediators. The Syrian Arab Republic once again warns Israel and its sponsors of the dangers of these aggressive policies that push the region towards a comprehensive escalation and a new phase of insecurity and instability. Also, we call upon the Security Council to abandon and forgo its silence and to urgently shoulder its responsibility to end the Israeli occupation of Arab territories and to implement relevant United Nations resolutions, especially Security Council Resolutions 242 and 338, as well as Resolution 497, which considers Israel's decision to annex the Golan Heights null and void and with no legal effect. Mr. President, before concluding, I would like to point out that the European Union delegation usually uses this meeting on the situation in the Middle East to raise issues related to the situation in Syria that are totally irrelated to the topic of the meeting, in an open attempt to divert attention from discussing the crimes committed by Israel in the region. This also proves their adherence to unrealistic policies that have become anachronistic and are overtaken by developments and events, where Syria needs concerted international efforts to help it overcome the negative repercussions resulting from the erroneous policies pursued by their countries for more than 10 years, especially by mercilessly imposing, along with the United States of America, unilateral, immoral, and inhumane sanctions on the Syrian people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Я благодарю представителя
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for that statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency